Much, Mary. Good morning, everybody. Hey, again. It is such an honor to be here this morning with you all, and I want to thank, first off, I want to thank Gary and Bill. Bill for the invite some time ago. Actually, it seems like years ago, but it was probably some months ago. Bill reached out and asked if I might be able to come out and just say a few words this morning. And I said, of course, I would love to. I would be so honored to. So, again, to Gary and to Bill, thanks for holding this and all the work that goes into it. Also, I'd like to thank our partner, Mary. And Mary, as you all know, force of nature, right? Force of nature, Mary. And she's doing so many things to help so many folks across the valley, both in employment, but also receive services, the services they need. So I also want to thank my colleagues from Momentum for Mental Health who are staffing the table in the back. I want to thank former colleagues for actually hooking me up with Bill. I want to thank all the many 12-step groups here today, throughout the whole day. It's great to see such a wide array of 12-step groups working together. And, you know, the thing about the recovery movement, it's a big tent. It's a big tent that fits everybody, right? And it's the beauty, actually, of the recovery movement. And again, thank you to all the speakers. I appreciate Mary introducing me, a little background. In addition, I just have to say I'm back in my old neighborhood. I went to Bookson Elementary down the street. A long time ago, my father was involved in local politics here in San Jose, city councilman, vice mayor, got elected to Congress, and then we moved from our house down the street. We moved to Alexandria, Virginia. And so we spent 6th grade through 12th grade back east. My brother went K to 12 back east and didn't come back until came back to Cal for undergraduate at San Jose State. So it's sort of ironic. I love being back in the Willow Glen neighborhood. And it's kind of full circle, right? Sort of just how life works, kind of full circle. All right, so the point of today is I'd like to share a little bit of my experience working for the president in advancing recovery. That was my job within the administration, was to work on prevention, treatment, and for the very first time in a presidential administration, recovery. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you, Gabrielle. We thought it was a huge deal, too. So one of the things we want to do is actually just share some stories, see if we can kind of connect the dots between a grassroots movement that is occurring all across the country around recovery and how it's affecting things at the very top of our society, our government, companies, corporations, giant corporations. So hopefully that's my task today. So first off, I want to check with you, how many of you saw or either attended or watched the March on Washington, the Unite to Face Addiction rally on October 4th, 2015? Of course, Gabrielle, very good. So for those of you who didn't, who weren't able to go or watch, that was a national rally on the National Mall in support of recovery. Right? It's in view of the White House. It's in the sort of the heart of our nation's capital, and it is exposing to the country the absolute power and force that the national recovery movement is. And so it came about from a group called Facing Addiction. It's a national nonprofit. The co-founders are Greg Williams and Jim Hood. And Greg, many of you may know from a documentary he made a few years ago about recovery. And this whole group, the whole purpose, again, is to show the power of recovery and to force out in the open that power sort of so the rest of the country can actually see it. But what I would ask is for us to consider there were, just like in recovery, there were other moments before that big day. Because this day, October 4, 2015, is going to go down as a seminal moment in recovery history in our country. In fact, maybe the world. But there were a lot of moments leading up to that maybe folks didn't see, but I want to actually show, again, that connection between the grassroots and the very, very top of our society. So, if you will, I'd like to go back to March 13th, 2014. March 13th, 2014. Think about where you were. March 14th, 2014. So in our office, we had sent our director, our acting director, Michael Botticelli, was in Vienna. He was in Vienna, Austria, attending a UN meeting around addictions. And he was the acting director. He wasn't the permanent director. So he was our deputy director, promoted to acting director by the president. And now he is in Vienna representing the country. So a little bit about Michael, for those of you who may or may not know about Michael. Over 20 plus years in recovery, involved in a DUI, and given a choice between treatment or custody, he chose treatment. He was the director of the Massachusetts Alcohol and Drug Department. And he also, for biographical purposes, he's also gay. He's also married to his longtime partner, David Wells, who they married in 2009. And again, he was formerly from New York, but he was sort of associated with Massachusetts. Okay. So Michael is off to Vienna to talk and to represent the United States. Now, when one of our government officials goes on a trip like this, it takes months to prepare them. So our office started working on that months before March 2014. So we've got to work with the National Security Council, we have to work with the State Department, we've got to work with all these other, agencies, small, big agencies, and we're coordinating that trip. On this trip, you're going to meet with other governments, you're going to go to side events that are really big. They aren't part of the main agenda, but they're these side events, but they're like official events sponsored by countries. Prepare important policy statements that the government's going to make through a speech that Michael gives. And we're going to make arrangements for the many social events. And we're coordinating all this with the security detail that Michael has, the U.S. Marshals Service. So this is a big traveling show. It takes months. This was Michael's first trip abroad, representing the United States as the acting director, as the head of the Office of National Drug Control Policy, the White House Drug Policy Office. So our office set up for the very first time a side event specifically on recovery. The USG, the U.S. government, had never done this before. So this is a big deal for us. It's a big deal trip, and we're all really excited about it. Now, typical UN events, where the country delegations are all seated together, right? Picture a UN event, all the countries are sitting together. Many of them have headsets on for simultaneous translation. Again, this is a U.S. government-sponsored event. So Michael is opening it up. He's the head of delegation for the United States. So similar to a room like this, let's say you all are the UN delegation sitting in your country delegations. You have your mics, your headsets. They open the event. They call up Michael. Michael walks up. He's carrying this book, exactly this same kind of book, because I got it for him. Opens it up. His speech is laid out. And he looks out at the audience. And it hits him. It hits him about the path that he's taken to be standing at that podium. Representing his president, representing his country, and representing himself as a person in long-term recovery. And all the many Americans who are in recovery themselves, all the family members. All that swells up inside Michael, and he can't start his speech. I don't know if you ever met Michael. Gabrielle knows him. But Michael's not a shy guy. He'll talk anywhere. He gives great speeches. He's on point. He's fantastic. He can't start a speech in front of a room of UN colleagues. So he looks over at our staff person. He looks, and he gives him that look like, I can't do this. So after taking a lot of deep breaths, he's got nowhere else to go. He starts his speech. But he explains to the assembled attendees what is happening and what just happened for him. He tells them about his own path. He tells them a little about who he is. And, it's that moment in time that I don't know if he actually knew was coming. But he got the speech off, and the United States is on the map internationally, putting down markers about recovery. Right? Go U.S., okay? All right, second event. Wednesday, September 17th, 2014. It's Recovery Month, 2014. And this is the 25th anniversary of Recovery Month. Right? Starts in 1989. This is the 25th anniversary, and Director Botticelli tasks us. He says he'd like to do something at the White House, commemorating the 25th anniversary of Recovery Month. The White House has never hosted a Recovery Month event. We say, that sounds really good. Okay, we're on it. We'll go try to put this together. So we invited some high-profile and fairly, both high-profile and fairly unknown speakers. Nonetheless, very important speakers, all of them. So on that speakers list that day was Chris Carter, formerly of ESPN and an NFL Hall of Fame receiver for the Minnesota Vikings, who was very open about his life in recovery. I happen to be driving to work every day. I listen to ESPN. I listen to Mike and Mike. Chris Carter's on all the time. He's talking about an NFL receiver who was having problems with marijuana, who has essentially been suspended, lost his job for a while. And Chris Carter proceeded to explain addiction on the air. And I thought, wouldn't it be kind of cool if we could get him to come to this thing? Christina Huffington, the daughter of Arianna Huffington and former Congressman Michael Huffington, 20-something-year-old young person in long-term recovery. Former Washington Post reporter Ruben Castaneda, who wrote about the crack cocaine epidemic in Washington, D.C. In the late 80s, who at the time was also addicted to cocaine. And also, finally, Tim Wilson, the mayor of a small town in Minnesota, who himself was in recovery, who buried his daughter in her mid-20s in 2007 from a heroin overdose. So we had all these folks come in. Chris Carter said yes. We reached out to his agent. He says yes, love to come in. When the president heard we had Chris Carter coming in, he said, I'd like to meet Chris Carter. Okay, yeah, we could pull him off and bring him in. We also had a performing arts group from a local treatment center for women, N Street Village in Washington, D.C. These women were part of a theater performance group that had created and were performing a piece on their own recovery. And they had done it at the Kennedy Center. And our first director saw that and kept that alive with us. We said, it'd be great if we could have these ladies perform something at this event in the White House. So it was awesome. It was a spectacular day. And we had the largest auditorium in the White House for this event. Now, it's not located in the White House, right next door in the executive office building. Only seats about 150, only maybe 200 folks. But it was spectacular, man. The day was amazing. The White House streamed this out on the internet. White House Comms sent this out. And we were so excited and so proud. And I got to MC it. And I thought, this is awesome. This is awesome. Awesome. But I want to give you an inside look at what it takes to have our community, providers, folks in recovery, family members, about 170 come in onto the grounds of the White House. So when you come into the White House, in order to make it onto the grounds, we have to clear everybody who comes in. Clear them with background checks. We don't do it. The Secret Service does it. So what we do is we have to give the Secret Service name, your legal name, your date of birth, your social security number, where you live, and your citizenship status. Just, what are you, U.S. citizen? So the Secret Service runs the names, and they clear folks to come onto the campus. So they'll run everything. They have access to all of it, right? Any kind of violations, any types of arrests, pickups, right? Well, sometimes for folks in recovery, there might be a criminal justice record. Might be. Maybe not. Maybe not, okay? But I have to say, this was also an underlying purpose of the event. Is we needed to educate folks within the White House around what it means to work and to work, to love, to know people in recovery. Recent recovery, long-term recovery, whatever. People and folks in recovery. So this was our policy around recovery, supporting folks in recovery at work. So we tried to work around barriers that were placed in front of folks who were in recovery, that made people feel less than, that made people feel like there were obstacles in their way to support their long-term recovery. How does that make sense? To keep paying for past violations of all levels from your past should stop and not prevent you from enjoying the 25th anniversary of Recovery Month at the White House, right? At the People's House. So once you make it on campus, you wear badges, all kinds of these badges. So for an appointment with somebody, you would get a green badge. For an event, you would have a blue badge. And it says event. So for some reason, we're seeing all these pink badges. Lots of pink badges. I'd never seen that before. So I asked one of our staff, it's like, what's up with all the pink badges? And they said, that means escort. That means that person has to be escorted every second while they're inside by a staff person. That something came up on the background check, something that concerned the Secret Service, and so they have to have staff escort the entire time they're inside. And if they don't, we're going to get in trouble, and that person's going to get kicked out. So that was interesting. Didn't know that. And clearly I'd never seen an event inside the EEOB, the old executive office building, that had that many folks who needed a pink badge. So after the event, we did a little post meeting with Secret Service, and maybe they had asked for it. And they said, we don't want you to do that event on campus anymore. You should do that at a hotel here in D.C. And we told them that's exactly why we did it at the White House. Is because folks in recovery, as I said earlier, have every right to be in this building. And it's up to the system, all of us, to make that happen. Right? So we hold the event, great time. We took a picture inside the auditorium that day of folks who attended, and we felt that we were redoing a picture that had happened in D.C. some 30 years before. And it was a recovery community taking a picture in D.C. with Senator Smith. And some celebrities and the whole thing, but we did it inside the White House. So anyway, Michael loved it. All right, that's the second event, right? The second event is September 2014. The third event is Friday, March 6th, 2015. Friday, March 6th, 2015. This is after Michael is confirmed by the U.S. Senate. The President nominates Michael to be the permanent director of ONDCP, simply acting off his name. And he's confirmed, and we're going to do a swearing-in ceremony for him. So, of all the places you could go for a swearing-in ceremony as the director of ONDCP, where could you think of, all these different places, where would you go? You could choose really anywhere. Government building, auditoriums, there are all kinds of auditoriums all across the departments. Michael chose N Street Village. He chose that women's recovery, the treatment center in D.C., a few blocks away from the White House, where the women came that performed for us at the recovery event at the White House. He said, I'd like to go there and actually do the swearing-in ceremony there. So we said, that sounds great, we'll set it up. Once again, White House comms comes out. They set up the cameras, and they send the feed out on the White House channel. So now this is going out across the network and across the internet. Again, I was very fortunate to be the MC that day, and had another opportunity to experience the magic and the power, I think, of what this movement is about. And I'd like to read a little selection from Michael's speech that day. And if you Google this, you could find it too. This is remarks by Director Botticelli at his swearing-in ceremony. 27 years ago, I was a broken man. You may not have been able to tell looking from the outside, since I had a good job with a well-respected academic institution, and I dressed well, of course, but my insides were rotting away. Addiction had taken me to people, places, and things that I would never have chosen. Like millions of other people, my developing addiction progressed unchecked, undiagnosed, and uninterrupted until an intersection with the law provided me with the opportunity to get care and to begin the process of recovery. Despite the fact that I had a strong genetic predisposition to this disease, I cannot recall a time when someone, a physician, a counselor, told me that I was significantly higher risk of developing a substance use disorder. Like many others, I also recall that despite the fact that I knew I needed help, I was too embarrassed and ashamed to ask for it. I thought that people would think I was stupid, weak-willed, morally flawed, that to live a life without alcohol would be dull and boring, isolating, loveless, joyless, and lifeless. To say that I was wrong is perhaps the greatest understatement of my life. Like millions of others in recovery, I was given a life that I could never have imagined. I found true friends, I found love and was able to marry him and even introduce him to the Judiciary Committee. I found my life's work and have been given opportunities that amaze me on a daily basis. I found myself and my voice. While this has been a journey filled with love and joy and happiness, it has not been without pain. Like many of us, I have lost countless friends and family to this disease, lost countless more to AIDS, endured the passing of many of our family members. But I did it as a full participant in my own life with a sense of purpose, meaning, and community that is impossible to describe. I was recently rewatching a movie called Milk, the biopic about the life of Harvey Milk, the first openly gay person to be elected to office in California. As he and his cadre of advocates were strategizing on how to defeat an anti-gay ballot referendum, he urged all of them, insisted really, to come out to their family, friends, employers, neighbors, pastors. He fundamentally knew that to change public opinion and change public policy required an individual and collective coming out. That it was too easy to vote against us if they didn't know us. There is a growing and unstoppable recovery movement afoot, being led by many people right here in this room. It gains momentum daily. People in recovery and those who love us, who are refusing to live in the shadows, refusing to continue to carry their secret. We are and will continue to change hearts and minds by the simple act of being honest and open about who we are, what our struggles were, and how we overcame them. 26 years into recovery, I still find it impossible not to be moved by someone's story. So again, think about this. This is his swearing-in ceremony. We have a judge. Michael's husband's right behind him. And he's taking the oath for this office. So later that summer, there's a postscript on this swearing in. Later that summer, I was on a trip to somewhere in the Midwest. I think it was Indianapolis, and I was there to give a speech, get an award, and after the ceremony, as usually happens, you walk out, you're sitting there talking to folks. They want to ask you questions, want to ask clarification on something. And this young woman comes up smiling and begins sharing that she's trying to start a women's treatment center in Alaska. Mind you, we're in the Midwest. Okay? And she's saying she wants to start this treatment center in Alaska for women coming out of the criminal justice system. And would like to give them kind of the chance of recovery that someone gave her. But she says she's having trouble with people in the neighborhood. They don't want those women in their neighborhood. Unfortunately, those women were women from the neighborhood. But as she's talking to me, she's starting to cry. I can see the glistening in her eyes of welling tears. And again, she repeats that she's in recovery. And then she watched the director's swearing-in ceremony. And then she tells me how proud and happy and motivated she is to try to open up this women's treatment center in Alaska. And she felt that way because she saw that swearing-in ceremony. And she heard what Michael said. And then she was going to go back to Alaska and she was going to make that work. So these are the little stories. And they aren't so little, but they're stories that folks, you wouldn't normally see. You wouldn't normally hear about. Again, people in recovery and those folks who love someone in recovery are making this movement become the force, the tidal wave of health, of good, of wellness that this community has always known. Right? This community has always known and appreciated. But quiet no more. Can't be quiet. Folks in recovery and their allies must speak out and raise the community up. Remember the grassroots community movement that is every day here in San Jose, in Silicon Valley, in the Bay Area. Couple that with the organizing support organizations all around this room supporting recovery on a wider level across housing, treatment, prevention, mainstream health, employment. And finally, I would ask that you remember those 3 days. I would ask you to remember my former boss, Director Botticelli. And remember that this grassroots movement had an impact all the way up into the White House. And from the White House back into the community. That is such amazing power that we all have. So I just want to, again, thank you for this opportunity. I want to thank you all for coming out today to be able to hear a social worker, former government guy, share a few stories. So again, thank you all for coming out. I want to thank Mary, Gary, and Bill for this opportunity. And thank you all for all you do in maintaining recovery. recovery supports in San Jose. Thank you all very much.